At the first level of Marvel's divine hierarchy, we have the pantheon gods, the familiar mythological figures most people picture when they hear the word god. We're talking about Thor, Loki, Hercules, Ares, Balder, Heimdall, Bast, and many others. These characters come from divine families and ancient pantheons such as the Asgardians, Olympians, and Egyptian gods, with each group carrying its own history, culture, rivalries, and very messy family drama. And honestly, that family drama is half the fun. Thor can be saving the 9 realms one afternoon, while Loki is quietly preparing some ridiculous scheme because Odin said something mildly insulting 3 centuries ago. They live for long periods, possess bodies far beyond ordinary humans, and often have natural magical abilities tied to who they are. Even a relatively minor god can usually tear through normal soldiers, survive attacks that would instantly kill a human, and go toe-to-toe with powerful superheroes. And this level feels kind of personal. Thor gets angry, Hercules gets overconfident, Loki gets jealous, Ares absolutely loves a good war, and Balder can be dragged into the consequences of somebody else's terrible decision. Their stories still revolve around battles, relationships, kingdoms, honor, revenge, and family. You can walk up to one of these gods, have a conversation with them, annoy them, fight them, and sometimes even beat them. They have physical bodies, recognizable personalities, and clear weaknesses. Thor can be injured, Loki can be captured, Hercules can be knocked unconscious, and gods have even died in Marvel. Although death has a habit of becoming slightly negotiable when magic, prophecies, reincarnation, and comic book resurrections get involved. So at this level, divinity feels surprisingly close to superhero storytelling, just with much older characters and a lot more enchanted weapons lying around. Their powers also tend to reflect their mythology and role attached to them. Thor commands storms and lightnings, Heimdall possesses extraordinary senses, Ares is deeply connected to warfare, and Bast carries the spiritual authority of the Panther goddess. Hercules relies heavily on absurd physical strength, while Loki naturally leans towards sorcery, illusions, transformation, and deception. That variety is important, because 2 gods from the same tier can fight in completely different ways. Ares might charge straight into battle and turn the whole thing into a bloodbath, while Loki would rather trick everyone into fighting each other and disappear before somebody realizes what happened. Their divine nature gives them a huge starting advantage over mortals, but individual skill, magical knowledge, weapons, experience, and status still matter enormously. So a good way to understand Tier 7 is to look at the scale of their everyday stories. These gods can protect kingdoms, destroy armies, battle monsters, travel between realms, and occasionally participate in events with consequences far beyond Earth. Some of them have feats that become genuinely ridiculous because Marvel power levels have never been famous for behaving themselves. Thor especially can create headaches for any niche ranking system, since his power changes dramatically depending on the era, writer, weapon, and version. For this hierarchy, we are talking about the standard or most representative versions of these characters. Base Thor belongs here as one of the greatest warrior gods, while versions like Old King Thor or other massively empowered forms can climb much higher. But as we move higher through Marvel's hierarchy, power starts becoming much stranger. Personal strength slowly gives way to authority over realms, cosmic systems, and eventually the basic ideas holding existence together. Tier 7 is our starting point, where a god can still walk into a bar, order a drink, start an argument, and accidentally turn the evening into a myth people talk about for the next 1,000 years. One level above the regular pantheon gods, we reach the god kings and dimensional lords, where names like Odin, Zeus, Mephisto, Dormammu, Surtur, Umar, Hela, and Vinci start entering the conversation. These are the heavyweights of the divine and mystical world, the beings who can make ordinary gods suddenly become much more careful with their words. Odin spent ages ruling Asgard as the All-Father. Zeus stands at the summit of the Olympian pantheon, and Dormammu commands the Dark Dimension with enough power to make even Doctor Strange treat every encounter like a genuine crisis. A character at this level usually has thousands or even millions of years of experience, enormous reserves of mystical energy, and some kind of authority over a kingdom, pantheon, dimension, or supernatural order. When one of them gets involved in a story, the problem tends to grow very quickly from there's a powerful villain to someone should probably check whether reality is still doing okay. The God Kings are the easiest side of this tier to understand. Think of beings like Odin and Zeus as the absolute peaks of their respective divine civilizations. Odin has the power power of the All-Father behind him, along with ancient magical knowledge, cosmic awareness, and a lifetime so long that Thor's adventures can sometimes feel like a rebellious phase from his perspective. Zeus plays a similar role among the Olympians, standing above gods like Ares and Hercules in the divine hierarchy. Their position also comes with access to resources that regular gods simply do not have, like enchanted weapons, ancient spells, royal authority, hidden knowledge, and generations of accumulated power. A fight involving one of these rulers can shake realms and pull entire pantheons into the conflict. And because Marvel loves making family gatherings as dangerous as possible, half the time the person challenging them is one of their own children. Then we have the Dimensional Lords, and things become much stranger. Mephisto and Dormammu are good examples because their power is deeply connected to supernatural realms where the usual rules can become very flexible. Dormammu's dark dimension is a place of magic, conquest, and bizarre cosmic geography, while Mephisto rules a hellish realm, shaped by his own influence. Inside their domains, these beings can become especially dangerous, because they have enormous control over the environment around them. Space can twist, matter can change, souls can be manipulated, and visitors may discover that the local laws of nature are basically whatever the ruler feels like enforcing that day. Doctor Strange might survive a battle with Dormammu through intelligence, magical skill, or some clever loophole, but walking into the dark dimension and trying to beat its ruler through raw force is usually a bad plan. Surtur and Hela show how broad this level can be. Surtur is an ancient fire demon whose very presence is such apocalyptic destruction, especially the fall of Asgard, and when he appears at full strength, entire civilizations have a reason to panic. Hela commands the dead within her sphere of influence and carries the kind of supernatural authority that makes a normal physical flight feel almost beside the point. These characters all reach tier 6 through slightly different paths. Some inherited the throne, some conquered a realm, and some built their power over ages of magic and warfare. That variety is why this tier works best as a functional level in the hierarchy. Oren and Dormammu are completely different beings, with different origins, weaknesses, and roles, but both operate on a scale where ordinary pantheon gods can find themselves badly outmatched. Another thing about tier 6 is that power now comes with authority. A tier 7 god might be an incredible warrior who can defeat monsters and armies, while a tier 6 ruler can have an entire supernatural world responding to their will. They make laws for gods, bargain with souls, command ancient armies, seal away cosmic threats, and carry grudges that can survive for thousands of years. Their battles can spill across dimensions, damage divine kingdoms, and leave consequences that last for generations. And yet, they still have personalities, ambitions, families, rivalries, and plenty of opportunities to make terrible decisions. Odin can be wise one moment and unbelievably stubborn the next. Mephisto can possess terrifying power and still spend an absurd amount of time making suspicious deals with people who really should know better. At tier 6, Marvel's gods begin moving beyond legendary warriors and into something much grander, and that's rulers whose kingdoms or dimensions can feel like extensions of their own power, setting the stage for the truly ancient beings waiting above them. Now we reach the primordial gods and the elder powers, and this is where Marvel's divine family tree starts getting deep. We're talking about beings like Chthon, Gaia, Set, Oster, Null, Shuma-Gorath, and Demogorgon. These are some of the oldest and strangest powers in Marvel, often connected to eras long before modern civilizations had temples, priests, or even names for the forces surrounding them. By the time Thor is swinging Mjolnir and Hercules telling everyone about his latest heroic achievement, some of these beings have already watched entire ages of creation come and go. They belong to the deep history of Marvel's mystical universe, where the boundaries between gods, monsters, magic, and raw cosmic forces were much less tidy, and naturally, most of them did not spend those ancient ages becoming emotionally well adjusted. The classic story begins with Earth's elder gods, among the earliest divine beings associated with the young planet. Chthon became one of the greatest powers associated with dark magic and chaos magic, leaving behind the infamous Darkhold and causing problems for countless generations of heroes. Gaia took a very different path, becoming deeply connected to Earth, life, and natural world, while also playing an important role in the ancestry of Thor himself. Set became a monstrous, ancient power associated with serpents and corruption, the sort of being whose return is rarely followed by a pleasant weekend. Oster traveled beyond Earth and eventually became one of the Vishanti, placing her right at the heart of Marvel's magical cosmology. And what makes these beings so fascinating is how their influence survives even when they are nowhere near the battlefield. A forbidden spell, an ancient bloodline, a cursed book, or some forgotten ritual can still carry the fingerprints of powers that existed before humanity. humanity. Then we have the broader, primordial powers, and this is where we need to be a little careful because they do not all share the same origin. Null, for example, should not be casually described as one of Earth's original elder gods. He is a separate, primordial being associated with the ancient darkness and the creation of the symbiotes, emerging from a completely different corner of Marvel mythology. Shumagorat is an ancient, extra-dimensional horror whose history stretches across worlds and dimensions, with the kind of presence that makes ordinary demons seem almost manageable. Meanwhile, Demogorgon became famous as the God Eater, a being tied directly to the terrifying possibility that gods themselves can become prey. So Tier 5 is home for these ancient, foundational powers whose roots reach far deeper than the familiar pantheons. They may come from different branches of Marvel lore, but they share that uncomfortable feeling that the universe had monsters in the basement long before anyone built the house. Powers at this level also become much harder to measure with a simple fight. Sure, these beings can be physically terrifying, but their real danger often comes from influence, corruption, magic, creation, and ancient connections to reality. Chthon can spread his power through the Darkhold and manipulate events from afar. Null created and commanded the symbiote hive, turning an entire species into an extension of his reach. Set's influence can survive through cults, serpent powers, and repeated attempts to return. Shumagorat can threaten realities through dimensions that barely resemble the normal universe. A hero might defeat an avatar, close a portal, destroy a body, or interrupt a ritual, and still have no guarantee that the ancient power behind the crisis is truly gone. And that makes these beings perfect for horror stories, because victory often feels temporary. Everyone celebrates, Doctor Strange looks exhausted, the Forbidden Book gets locked away, and somewhere in a dark corner of existence, an ancient god is basically saying, fine, I'll try again in a century. Tier 5 is where Marvel's hierarchy starts feeling genuinely ancient. The gods below can rule kingdoms and command dimensions, but these primordial beings are often woven into the oldest layers of magic, life, darkness, and supernatural history. Now we leave the ancient temples and forgotten magical caves behind and head into the cosmic side of Marvel, where everything becomes much bigger. Tier 4 is home to beings like Galactus, Arishem the Judge, Exitar the Exterminator, Tiamat the Dreaming Celestial, Aeon, the Stranger, Abraxas, and the In-Betweener. At this level, planets can feel surprisingly small. These beings involve themselves with the birth and death of worlds, the evolution of entire species, the balance of cosmic forces, and events that can reshape huge sections of the universe. A normal god might rule a kingdom or protect people, while someone like Galactus can arrive above a planet and turn its entire civilization into a brief discussion about lunch. And the scary part is that many of these entities have been around for so long that humanity barely registers on their personal timeline. Empires rise, conquer half the galaxy, disappear into history, and somewhere out there a Celestial is still quietly continuing a project it started millions of years ago. Galactus is probably the easiest character to use as the face of this tier because he perfectly captures how strange cosmic power becomes. He travels across space, consuming worlds to sustain himself, commands the power cosmic, creates heralds such as the Silver Surfer, and has spent countless stories standing at the center of universe-threatening events. His range can also change dramatically, depending on how well-fed he is, which has caused roughly 6 billion arguments among Marvel fans and will probably cost 6 billion more. A starving Galactus can be weakened and vulnerable compared with his better showings, while a properly fed Galactus can operate on a completely different scale. He also occupies a meaningful place in the cosmic balance, so his existence has consequences far beyond the planets unfortunate enough to appear on his menu. That makes him a great example of Tier 4. So he's enormously powerful, cosmically important, and still active enough to show up in a story, speak to heroes, make decisions, and occasionally have his plans ruined by the Fantastic Four. Then we have the Celestials, and they bring a completely different flavor of cosmic terror. Arishem, Exitar, Tiamat, and their kind are ancient spacefaring giants whose experiments have influenced the development of life across countless worlds. Earth itself became part of their enormous cosmic projects, and humanity has spent a good amount of time discovering that some giant armored beings were quietly involved in its history long before anyone knew what was happening. Arishem is associated with judgment, while Exitar arrives when that judgment goes very badly for the planet being examined, and when a Celestial appears, fighting it like a normal supervillain is usually a terrible idea. Even powerful gods have treated Celestials individuals as serious threats, and entire groups of heroes may be needed just to survive their attention. They have bodies, armor, personalities, and individual identities, but their scale of operation is so enormous that a civilization can feel less like an enemy and more like a sample being studied in a laboratory. Other members of Tier 4 show just how broad the cosmic world can be. Aeon is an ancient cosmic entity deeply connected to the role of the protector of the universe and has guided champions such as Pulsar. This stranger wanders the cosmos as a mysterious and incredibly powerful being, collecting worlds and studying civilizations with the slightly unsettling curiosity of someone building the universe's strangest shelf of souvenirs. The in-betweener exists around the balance between opposing forces such as order and chaos, giving him a much more metaphysical flavor than a celestial. Abraxas is even more dangerous, emerging as a destructive, cosmic presence connected to the absence of Galactus and threatening reality on an enormous scale. So once again, the characters in a tier are not all members of one species or one niche little club. Tier 4 groups together major cosmic powers whose normal influence reaches far beyond pantheons and planets, even though the exact source of that power can vary widely from one being to another. Galactus is Galactus. Arishem is Arishem. The stranger can travel somewhere, make a decision, conduct an experiment, and then leave. And as we move into Tier 3, even that familiar idea begins to fade, because next entities are tied to the fundamental concepts of existence. Now we reach the abstract and conceptual entities. We're talking about beings like Eternity, Infinity, Death, Oblivion, Master Order, Lord Chaos, Mistress Love, and Sire Hate. At this level, a cosmic entity can represent one of the fundamental ideas woven into existence, appearing as a conscious personality with a face, a voice, and occasionally a surprising amount of drama. Eternity is the great living embodiment of the cosmos. Death represents the principle of, you guessed it, death. And Oblivion is tied to the non-existence and the void beyond life. So when someone stands in front of one of these entities, the conversation has moved far beyond meeting a very powerful alien. It feels more like the universe has taken a moment out of its schedule, grown a face, and decided to have a chat with you, which is probably flattering right up until you realize the universe is annoyed. Eternity and Infinity are probably the best place to start, because they show how enormous this level really is. Eternity is commonly presented as a sentient embodiment of the universe and its total existence, with that famous star-filled body making him look like someone cut a person-shaped window directly into the cosmos. Infinity is his cosmic counterpart, closely associated with the endless expanse of creation, and the two are often treated as complementary aspects of reality. Their exact descriptions can shift a little across decades of stories because Marvel cosmology has been rewritten, expanded, and politely rearranged many times, but the basic idea remains. These entities are connected to the total structure of reality on a level that ordinary cosmic beings simply are not. Galactus can travel through the universe, consume worlds, and affect cosmic balance. Eternity represents the universe as a living cosmic whole. That difference is why this tier feels like such a major jump, even when comic book battles occasionally make the hierarchy look messier than anyone would prefer. Then we have Death and Oblivion, and naturally Marvel found a way to give both of them personalities. Death is the cosmic embodiment of mortality and the end of life, appearing in different forms depending on the story and the person encountering her. Thanos famously became obsessed with her, which led to one of the most unhealthy romantic pursuits in comic book history, and unfortunately for everyone else, several enormous piles of bodies. Oblivion goes somewhere even darker, representing non-existence, emptiness, and the absence waiting beyond creation. He is one of those characters who makes the world powerful feel slightly inadequate, because his whole nature is tied to the possibility of there being absolutely nothing at all. And this is also why we should avoid squeezing every abstract into one perfect clean rule. Death, Eternity, Infinity, and Oblivion have different functions, relationships, manifestations, and histories. Marvel likes symmetry, but it also likes changing the furniture every few years, so the cosmology rarely stays perfectly tidy for long. Master Order, Lord Chaos, Mistress Love, and Sire Hate show another side of the same idea. Master Order embodies order, structure, discipline, and the tendency of reality to settle into patterns, while Lord Chaos represents disorder, unpredictability, and the wild possibilities that appear when structure breaks apart. The two have spent ages existing in opposition, but also in a strange kind of partnership, because a universe with only perfect order would be just as unnatural as one with endless chaos. Mistress Love and Sire Hate work through another pair of forces that shape countless lives and civilizations. Every romance, obsession, feud, war, friendship, betrayal, and emotional disaster can feel like a tiny echo of principles these beings represent on a cosmic level. And yes, somewhere in Marvel's vast universe, there is probably a person whose terrible breakup is technically contributing to the grand metaphysical balance of existence. At least that gives them something comforting to think about, while eating ice cream at 3 in the morning. The really fun part of this year is how strange conflict becomes once ideas themselves have personalities. These beings can manifest through forms, avatars, aspects, and representations that allow them to interact with lesser creatures, and stories sometimes show them being imprisoned, weakened, challenged, or even apparently destroyed. Marvel being Marvel, context matters enormously. Cosmic artifacts, unusual alignments, temporary power-ups, and changes to reality can all create situations where someone punches far above their usual place in the hierarchy. But under normal conditions, Tier 3 marks the point where the gods of Marvel begin bleeding into the architecture of existence itself. Next up is the multiversal and beyond reality powers. We're talking about beings like the Living Tribunal, the Beyonder, the Beyonders, the First Firmament, Molecule Man, the Phoenix Force, the Griever at the end of all things, and the Black Winter. These names do not all belong to one species, of course, or family, or cosmic organization, and they definitely do not all have equal power. What brings them together is the sheer scale of which their biggest stories operate. Entire universes, alternate timelines, parallel realities, and sometimes the structure of the multiverse can become part of the problem. A Tier 3 abstract might embody a fundamental aspect of reality, while a Tier 2 power can potentially judge, invade, threaten, reshape, or operate across many realities at once. By now, Earth is barely a dot on the map. Actually, the map itself is in danger, along with every alternate version of the map and probably the person holding it. The Living Tribunal is the cleanest example, and probably the best face for this entire tier. He exists as a cosmic judge, whose role is tied to maintaining balance across the multiverse, traditionally standing above major abstract entities like eternity, infinity, death, and oblivion in Marvel's hierarchy. His three faces represent different aspects of judgment, usually associated with equity, necessity, and vengeance. And when he appears, the situation has normally grown far beyond the jurisdiction of ordinary cosmic beings. One of the most famous demonstrations of his authority came through the Infinity Gems, whose combined power he judged and restricted in a major cosmic ruling. The Tribunal has also been portrayed as serving the supreme authority of the One above all, placing him incredibly close to the summit of Marvel's cosmology. Of course, being close to the summit in Marvel does not guarantee a peaceful retirement, because the Beyonders eventually proved that even the multiverse's greatest judge could be killed. And that brings us to the Beyonders, some of the most frightening beings Marvel has ever introduced. They exist beyond the normal structure of the multiverse and became central to the collapse of reality, leading into Secret Wars. Their plan involved Molecule Man, scattered across different universes, each functioning as part of a vast multiversal mechanism that could destroy everything. When the great cosmic entities tried to oppose them, the results were pretty bad. The Beyonders killed Celestials, overwhelmed abstract powers, and even brought down the Living Tribunal across realities. Then there is the original Beyonder, especially his famous early portrayal, where he was presented with such absurd power that the entire Marvel multiverse could seem tiny beside him. Later stories changed and reinterpreted his nature, because apparently Marvel looked at one nearly omnipotent man with perfect hair and decided the cosmology was not complicated enough yet. So whenever you mention the Beyonder, it is worth specifying the version, since his place in the hierarchy can change dramatically depending on the era. Other beings reached Tier 2 through completely different paths. The First Firmament was the first cosmos, an ancient living reality that existed before the later cycles of Marvel's multiverse, and eventually returned with the goal of reclaiming creation. The Phoenix Force is another difficult but fascinating case, a vast cosmic force associated with life, death, rebirth, and the cycle of creation, with manifestations and hosts appearing across countless stories. Then we have beings like the Griever at the end of all things, connected to the ending of realities, and the Black Winter, a cosmic force capable of consuming universes and tied to the destruction of entire cosmic cycles. Tier 2 is messy by nature, because once stories become this large, every character seems to arrive with their own private definition of infinity. And that messiness is exactly why one rule matters here. These characters share a tier because of a multiversal scope. not because a fight between any two of them would automatically be equal. The Living Tribunal has a cosmic office and a place in the hierarchy. The Beyonders are external powers who attack that hierarchy. The Phoenix Force follows its own enormous cosmic role, while the First Firmament comes from the deepest history of creation itself. Their origins and functions are widely different, but all of them can become relevant when the fate of one universe is simply too small for the story being told. And somehow, after all of that, there is still one level left. Above judges, living realities, multiversal destroyers, and beings from beyond creation, Marvel keeps a final seat at the top of the hierarchy, the place reserved for the source behind everything. We reach Supreme Divinity, the highest and smallest tier in the entire hierarchy. After everything we have covered, pantheon gods, rulers of dimensions, primordial horrors, cosmic giants, living concepts, and beings capable of threatening the multiverse, we arrive at the one above all. And yes, the name is straightforward. Marvel could have given the Supreme Being some ancient title with 17 apostrophes, but instead they basically went with the one above everybody, which saves us a lot of time. The one above all occupies the ultimate summit of Marvel's creation and is generally presented as the supreme source behind all existence. Every universe, timeline, dimension, cosmic entity, god, mortal, and strange little pocket reality somewhere in the corner of creation ultimately exists beneath that highest level. Marvel has often given the character a gentle, almost strangely human presence. One of the most famous appearances came when Peter Parker encountered a mysterious man who encouraged him during a painful moment in his life, with this story strongly presenting that figure as the one above all. Another famous appearance involved Fantastic Four meeting a supreme creator who took the form of Jack Kirby, one of the real-world legends who helped build the Marvel Universe. That little moment tells you a lot about how Tier 1 works. At this height, supreme power begins touching the metatextual side of comics, where the creator of the universe can resemble the creators who literally draw and write it. It gives the one above all a warm quality that many cosmic beings lack. Then things get darker with the one below all, the terrifying presence introduced through the deeper mythology surrounding gamma energy and the below place. The one below all is associated with destruction, hatred, and the urge to reduce creation to nothing, becoming especially important in stories surrounding the Hulk. Its influence reaches through gamma mutates, possession, and the strange metaphysical doorway connected to gamma energy, giving the Hulk mythos a much larger cosmic horror dimension than anyone probably expected from a story that began with a scientist getting angry and smashing tanks. The one below all wants ruin on the grandest possible scale, and glimpses of a future where it succeeds show just how horrifying that goal can become. Through the Hulk, it can continue across unimaginable stretches of time until stars die, civilizations vanish, and existence itself approaches its final darkness. The one above all and the one below all should be handled carefully, because describing them as two completely separate and equal gods can give the wrong impression. Immortal Hulk revealed a much stranger connection, presenting the one below all as the dark underside of the same ultimate divine reality associated with the one above all. The famous idea that the one below all is the one above all turns the top of Marvel's hierarchy into something far more unsettling than a simple battle between good and evil. Creation and destruction become connected at the highest possible level, with the supreme source carrying an aspect that builds and an aspect that can break everything down. And because Marvel cosmology changes with writers, it is wise to leave a little room around the exact theology here. Trying to make a perfectly clean diagram of Marvel's supreme metaphysics is a wonderful way to lose an afternoon and somehow end up arguing with a stranger online about the Hulk. So Tier 1 is deliberately tiny, filling it with 8 or 10 characters would weaken the whole point of having a supreme level, because the summit of Marvel's hierarchy is supposed to feel almost empty. There is no army of stronger gods waiting casually above them, no normal cosmic promotion after this, and no niche collection of increasingly large space people. We began with gods like Thor and Hercules, beings who can walk among mortals, share meals, fall in love, start wars, and get punched through buildings. From there we climbed past Odin and Dormammu, Chthon and Null, Galactus and the Celestials, Eternity and Death, the Living Tribunal and the Beyonders, and at the very top, after all that noise and impossible power, Marvel gives us something surprisingly quiet, a creator, a source, and the final mystery behind why anything exists at all.